need you to like me, don't need you to like me. You can say hello, but I don't need you to like me, don't need you to like me, don't need you to like me. You can watch me go, cause I don't need you to like me, don't need you to like me, don't need you to like me. You can say hello, but I don't need you to like me, don't need you to like me, don't need you to like me. You can watch me go, cause I don't need you to like me, don't need you to like me, don't need you to like me. You can say hello, but I don't need you to like me, don't need you to like me, don't need you to like me. You can watch me go, cause I don't need you to like me, don't need you to like me, don't need you to like me.
Hello everybody, hello, good evening, good afternoon, hope all is well, you're all keeping safe, and all excited for this evening's chat with a very special guest indeed. However, first of all, you all know now I can't do these shows all by myself, I need a co-host, and that co-host is the finest man of FPL himself, FPL Booner. Hiya pal, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you mate, how are you?
Yes, I am not too bad, not too bad. A good few folk in as usual already, raring to go, and I've seen, honestly, the amount of questions you've had for this afternoon's guests, unbelievable. So let's get them introduced and get them into the studio alongside us. Remember, chat, if you want to get yourself involved, you're more than welcome to, so please do. Any questions that you've got, you know who the guest is, so start popping them in the chat and we'll get through as much as we can within the next hour or so. Our guest this evening is by far one of the top pillars of our FPL community. If a player's to get injured, then this guy is all over it. He's the go-to leading injury specialist as the guru in this area for the likes of people like little companies, Boona, like Sky Sports, ESPN, NBC Sports, sometimes even the BBC get involved with him, or Talk Sport if a wee quote's required. To say this guy is all over injuries in the Premiership is a massive understatement. With over 138,000 followers on Twitter, and God knows, Boona, how many DMs this guy must get asked on a daily basis. Is so-and-so okay for this game week? Piling into his inbox. He's also an ambassador for Fan Team Official. Please give a lounge welcome to one of the hardest working people in our FPL industry. It's a true honour and a total privilege to have in beside us the guy that knows his fractures better than Boona knows his curries, Mr. Ben Dinnery. Hello.
Wow, what an introduction. I don't think I'm embarrassed. I'm blushing. That was fantastic. I wasn't sure you were talking about me. Great to be here, by the way, guys. Thank you.
No, thank you. As I say,
you've definitely underestimated my knowledge of curries, by the way.
No, it's, as I say, it's such an honour to have you in alongside us this evening. For yourself, I know Boona's probably just went over it in the last 5 minutes. For anyone that's new joining us, good evening and welcome to that FPL Lounge. Every Thursday evening we like to get one of the pillars of the community in alongside Boona and I, just to chat things FPL, but also, more importantly, get to know the person in a little bit more detail. So Ben, for the first kind of 5-10 minutes, we've got a few questions that Boona and I like to ask all our guests to get to know you a little bit better. And then, well, by God, you should see some of the questions that the community have thrown towards Boona. And if the chat have got anything to ask, we will try to get through as much as we can. So I hope you're ready, and for that, Ben, hope you're all chilled out, relaxed, sitting back. And Boona, I'll let you kick things off, mate.
Yeah, brilliant. Ben, firstly, absolute pleasure to have you here, mate. I've followed you for a few years now, so thank you for everything you do for the FPL community, although it's not just for the FPL community. So, Lama, and to those listening, just to set expectations, we're going to be going for about 45 more minutes, up until about 6 o'clock. And the first question we ask all of our guests, Ben, is how did you get involved in FPL?
How? Ooh, right, we're going back in the day. I mean, we're talking 2001.
Oofed.
Yeah, so a long time ago. That probably shows my age. I'm 43, by the way. So yeah, started out with a company called physioroom.com. And as most good ideas and businesses come to fruition, it happened on a Friday night over a couple of beers. And fantasy football was just gaining a little bit of momentum. You know, it wasn't as mainstream as it was now. It was more of a niche product, but you know, as you do, a group of lads, we decided to put a few teams together, and we were having a conversation with regards to player availability. And I don't remember the precise nature of the conversation, but it may have been along the lines of, you know, is Kieran Dyer fit for tomorrow? And one of the guys we were with was actually on, he was studying at Manchester University on a physiotherapist course, and he had a placement at Manchester United. And through that placement, he was travelling with the development side. And he had made a few friends and contacts in the game, and I think it went along the lines of, well, I know Derek Wright at Newcastle. We'll give him a call and we'll see if we can find out and get some gen. And it sort of snowballed from there, really. You know, it was a type of information that people were interested in getting, and it just sort of grew from a conversation over a couple of beers to, you know, putting something out with TalkSport on a Friday night, where we used to do you know, team previews, lineups, talk about those players who are injured, and just steadily that just grew and grew and grew over the years. We introduced the injury table, and as more people got interested, then our demands on time and information just become greater and greater. And here we are, almost 20 or so years later, still going strong.
Brilliant.
No,
Absolutely
that's brilliant. Unbelievable though. Listen, at 42 I am, Ben. Age is but a number. Age is but a number. But no, honestly, the amount of work you do, and I know people that are in our chat and are all over Twitter, you are the go-to person, when it comes to the injury statuses and stuff like that. And it's good to just get a bit of a background into how, you got yourself involved in it. So, no, thank you very much for that, for giving us a bit of a background. When it comes to FPL, please don't take this the wrong way, okay? Football team, does it influence any FPL decisions that you might have?
I try not to let the heart rule ahead.
Okay.
And I am pretty clinical when it comes to decisions that need to be made. I do get a little bit of motive with regards to not necessarily my own team with Newcastle, where I can literally be black and white. But there are certain players in the game and certain players over the years that I just don't like. Teams that I just don't like. Middlesbrough, Sunderland, for obvious reasons. So we'll find it very hard to involve any of those players. But and there's one or two. If you've listened to or you've seen any of the stuff that we produce, I'm not a big fan of Patrick Bamford. I just can't. There's just something there that I can't get him in my team. And one or two other players as well. So I try my best. But sometimes, those emotions do get the better of us, and they do influence some decisions.
We talk about influence quite a bit on the show, don't we, Boona? And especially, as you know, the Twitter sphere that's there. And as little a percentage as Twitter represents in terms of the grand scheme of things, of people playing the game, it's hard sometimes to look past it. I mean, do you see a lot of that yourself, whereby if a bandwagon occurs on Twitter, you think all of a sudden everybody in FPL's got that particular player in, or getting rid of them and stuff like that?
Yeah, look, I try not to follow, all these. There's so much. There's loads of great information out there. There's loads of great accounts, well researched, well voiced. But to me, ultimately, it's opinion, and does my opinion hold any more weight than yours? Certainly not. If you can believe in something and you can validate that, then absolutely fair enough. And for me, FPL and fantasy sports general, unless I'm playing maybe fan team for cash, but it's bragging rights, and I like to play the game a little bit different. I play anti-template is one of the things that I go for. I try to go for players whose ownership inherently won't be over 10%. But I stick to that as close as possible. This season, I've had a set and forget captain, which to me detriment. I used my first chip only. Was it last week or the week before? So I just try to keep it interesting and have fun. I'm not bothered about overall rank. Although, given the restrictions that I've set myself, I think I'm sitting in around maybe 1.5, 1.6, which I don't think is a bad overall rank, considering, like I say, some of I haven't got any of the. I think I'm sitting on 13% template according to FPL Live. So
that's certainly
You mentioned this set and forget captain. We actually had a question about this. We don't often come to the community's questions this quick, but it's probably appropriate right now. We had a question from Anand from the FPL Escapades, and he said, Rashford is Ben's set and forget captain this season. Will he change his approach next season or continue to do the same, despite knowing Rashford may well score less points overall than the likes of Bruno, Salah and co? I'll put an extension to that as well, Ben. Why Rashford?
Yeah, well, so I was going to lead off with that. So the selection of Rashford was nothing to do, literally, with the performance that he was putting on the pitch.
Who did you lose a bet against, Ben?
It was myself, actually. There was no. Yeah, this was more to do with his work off the pitch.
Okay.
And I just thought, you know what, actually, just as an ode to Rashford, I'm just going to stick him in there. And then ultimately, you know, for the first maybe 10 or 15 weeks, it was fairly enjoyable. Although I wasn't getting the returns, it was one less headache. So I didn't have to worry about, you know, I'm not worrying about who the captain, I'm not, he's just there and it's done regardless. And, you know, a lot of occasions this season, it didn't seem to work, but then you get the odd, you know, that rare game week where he gets a brace and a couple of assists, and you really see the upturn and perform, you know, in your overall rank and stuff like that. So I do like that. I like the roller coaster of the having this unpredictable anti-template team as opposed to, you know, going with a sheep. And, you know, what's the point in having, for me, if you have high ownership players and, oh, I've got 70 points this game week, well, everybody in and around has got 70 points.
Yes.
At least I know if I have a bad game week, I drop like a stone. If I have a good game week, you know, I'm having a big green arrow.
Yeah.
So would I do it again? That's a question. I wouldn't go with Rashford again. He's you know, that he's had his moment. I wouldn't rule anything out. No. I am considering you know, running a differential Dinnery league, which is what I'm pretty much known as now, and where we have anti-template players, we have a set and forget captain, and we don't use any chips. So that's a possibility for the new campaign, but there's nothing set in stone at this moment.
Perfect. No, I like that, Boona. I like that approach from Ben. I did something a little bit different this year. Ben, I just decided that I was going to go all out value for the first 12 game weeks and just try and catch every price rise going. I'm doing okay now. I'm starting to get up the kind of ladder now, so to speak, in terms of overall rank. But my bank balance is nearly 108 million, which I think is pretty decent at this time of year. Would I do it again? Possibly. Like what you're saying, I certainly don't play the game. Like we've had a lot of great guests in the studio alongside us, and they're quite templatey in the sense of, you know, they're slow play the game. I just can't do it. As soon as the hammer comes, you know, gets released and we can make transfers again, I'm all over it. But that's how I like to play it, you know, play it with a smile on my face and just enjoy it.
Can I just remind you, take this opportunity to remind you that unfortunately, unlike real life, you can't actually remortgage your FPL team and take that money out and go on holiday. Just to remind you. But, we did ask Ben a question about how we got involved in FPL, but more importantly, Ben, how did you get involved in the world of injury status and all that you do? So we were speaking offline. Ben does this 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Maybe not 24 hours a day. Hopefully you get some sleep. But Ben, over to you.
Yeah, so fundamentally, when we went back to physio room, we created the injury table, and the injury table was used as a way of driving traffic to the website, which was e-commerce, and on the back of that, we would sell products, so ankle supports, knee supports, yada yada yada, and you know that was all well and good, and so you had to, you know, gather and collate that information to populate the injury table. Approaching sort of 2009, 2010, we wanted to take that just a little bit more seriously. We felt there was a little bit of value in that data and things that could be done with it. And I wasn't never really interested in the e-commerce and the sales types of the website. So it was, for me, then it was all about the injury status, the return to play, the return to performance. And, you know, you look at a good example you could maybe call upon would be somebody like Harry Kane. So Harry Kane pulls up with his annual ankle injury, and you'll say, right, you know, typically Harry might be out 5 games. So people in the fantasy community would go, oh, well, yeah, that's all right. So he's going to miss the next 5 games, all well and good. However, you scratch beneath the surface and you may look at the data, and that data would suggest, well, yes, Harry Kane returns to play within 5 games, but it may take another 3 or 4 games before Harry Kane is returning to performance.
Mm.
Now, ultimately, as a fantasy manager, you want to know when that player returns to performance, because if you're going to have 2, 3, 4 dead game weeks where he's just building up fitness and sharpness and he isn't going to get you the returns for that premium attacker, then do you really want him in your starting 11? So it was about, like I say, just looking underneath those return to play timelines and seeing what the real impact is on a player, returning back to that pitch. And for me, that's what it's always been about, and it's gleaning those insights and getting those nuggets of information, to hopefully, like I say, share with the community and hopefully others can, take some value from that as well.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then how did that link in with like Sky Sports and stuff? Was it just almost like a natural progression, Ben?
So when we first started to do, all this fantasy and the injury stuff, and you took maybe the mainstream broadcasters and some of the big news outlets, and you mentioned fantasy football, and they almost were sort of sniggering under their breath. They would have this, this little wry smile, and they would laugh, and it was like, you are a grown man here. But then I think, towards the end of the noughties in particular, when fantasy really did get that traction in the market, and these big corporations seen the value in the amount of traffic that they could garner and drive to their websites, and because it was more prominent, injuries were able to sort of piggyback onto that, and mainstream, injuries are now far more mainstream. You're talking about, everybody wants to know. You're talking about a time crunched environment. So particularly if it's a high profile or a high status player, first thing anybody wants to know is, when is that player going to be back on the pitch?
Yeah.
So us collecting the data and understanding, the player, the background, the history, the club, the manager, the backroom staff, we're able to provide insight and an understanding of, some of those influencing factors on what can determine or impact on a return to play, and so that fed nicely into the media work that we do. And of course, we have the data going back, which is which we're able to provide. And because if you look elsewhere, it's very difficult and hard to come upon. So we sort of created that niche and almost became like a bit of a go-to. So when most people want to know about injuries and statistics and timelines, then inherently it's Physio Room or Premier Injuries as it is now.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. A couple of questions really left from the two of us, Boona, and then I think we'll just dive straight into the community stuff. Boona, you can keep an eye on all the Twitter stuff that you got throughout the last few days, and I'll try and keep a handle on the chat in here. So, Boona, you want to kick off with your kind of last type of question, and then I'll kick off with the usual one, or finish off, I should say, with the usual one.
Yeah, I've got a slightly different question, because I feel like the question that you're referring to that we ask week in, week out, it's getting a bit boring, so we're going to go a bit more eventful than that.
That's all right.
Ben, with the amount of time that you invest in doing, what you're doing on a daily basis, how much time are you actually able to allocate, or do you allocate to FPL decisions? So obviously injuries is a key part of it, and you're probably getting pestered day in, day out about the same player by about 500 people. When is he back? When is he back? When is he back? Obviously that you've got greater knowledge about that, and that can help you with certain transfer decisions. But as you know, a lot of FPL managers look at other things like stats, like eye test, and the rest of it. How much time would you say on a week you spend towards that and helping you kind of make your decisions, if at all?
I think it's probably important to give a little bit of context here, because what I would probably say is most of my decisions are made 15 minutes before deadline. I want all of the information to hand. I don't really want to get caught out by any late surprises. But because I'm ingrained in the daily discussion, and because it's a job, this is my job. It's not a hobby. It's not something that I just do because I like it. I work in this environment, so I do my due diligence. Ahead of every game week, I cover every press conference. I read every match report. I do all the post-match analysis. I'm writing columns for fantasy sports. I'm doing team lineups. I'm looking at the stats. So I'm absorbing all of that information anyway, on a daily basis. And, if there are players that maybe I particularly like or something that just comes to the fore during my day-to-day working, I'll scribble the name down on a piece of paper. And when it comes to deadline, I'll take a look at that list and then, I'll decide at that point, do I still want them, do or not? And then I pull the trigger. And really, it is that. I mean, to give you, I think I used my wild card last week and I only decided 20 minutes before deadline without any prep, without looking at any of the upcoming fixtures or double game weeks or anything like that. I just went in and pulled the trigger, activated it. I work on spur of the moment and I do what I think's right for my team at that particular point. I think I say if there was 3 or 4 players that I wanted to bring in, I also have another rule that I don't take any hits. So I've now had a hit for 2 seasons. And if I wanted to bring those players in, the only option that I had was a wild card, which I did.
Oh. So am I right? Did
I hear that right? You've not taken a hit for 2 seasons?
Yeah, it might even be. I'm sure it's maybe even 2.5.
Wow,
that's surprising. That's surprising, given your strategy with Rashford and the set and forget captaincy and in your general style of play. That comes as a surprise, I've got to say. I never seen it in the value really. I was like most. I would quite happily, take the odd 4, maybe the occasional 8. And then I'd look at the end of the season and think, wow, there's 32, 38, 40 points. And then you'd look and what really did I gain from those changes? And inherently, it was never quite enough to justify the decision. Most of it was a bit of a punt, if the truth be known. And I just thought, well, a little bit of, planning and maybe on occasions, I think I have played with the odd 9 or maybe even 10 players, but I still see it as I've just got it in my head now that I won't take a hit. So, and I just like to work that way. You know what? If I'm gonna lose points, lose them on the pitch.
Yeah. With
an Andreas Christensen being subbed on for Thiago Silva last weekend type of scenario, rather than it being of my own doing, with frivolous transfer decisions.
I think that's amazing. I can't imagine our Buna here going 2 seasons without
I've taken a hit this weekend. So I've just taken more hits this weekend than Ben has in 2.5 years. It's absolutely insane.
Crazy. Right, Ben, we'll finish off our little kind of thing with the one question that every single guest had. But what you need to do, Ben, is put yourself in the position, alright? So,
yep.
It's the final seconds of a Champions League final. And you, Ben, are through on goal 1-on-1 with the keeper. You're just about to lace the ball with your boot when out the corner of your eye you see your strike partner standing there. Now you know that if you pass to him he's surely not going to miss because keeper's 1-on-1 with you, he's got an open goal. However, Ben, it's the last seconds of the Champions League final. It's all on you. However, what are you doing? Are you smashing it or are you passing it?
I would like to think I'm pretty unselfish, and I would lay it off for the teammate. For the good of the team. He scores, we'll get the title. I'm not one for all the accolades, so I would like to think that I would do the right thing.
Excellent. Well, Ben, thank you very much for going through Buna and I's usual kind of questions, getting to know you that little bit better. Much appreciated. We shall dive into what the community's been asking. So I know, Ben, that Buna has got an absolute rake of stuff that's came through via Twitter. We've already had quite a few good questions that have come in via the chat. So if you're all right over the kind of remaining, what have we got, 20 minutes?
20 minutes.
We'll just have a blare with the community, Ben, and we'll just see how it's going.
Fine.
What I can do if you want, it's entirely up to you. I and it's not because you're here. I do this behind your back as well. But I do use Premier Injuries, and we've actually showed it on stream before when people have asked about such and such a player. Are they injured? Well, I don't know. Let's have a look at the website and find out. So if you want, if it's easier for yourself, or if people in the chat want to have that as like a kind of reference, I'm more than happy to pop that up in the background if you want, whilst we kind of go through the stuff.
Look, entirely up to you. I mean, I know that an injury table inside out, it's all validated and it's all manually updated. There's nothing automated about it. So,
perfect.
Look, any questions, just fire them away. Hopefully I'll be able to straight back them straight.
No problem.
Brilliant.
Right, hoping I'll let you crack on then with some of the stuff that's came on Twitter.
So,
I'll show my ugly mug in the background, and we'll batter on with some questions.
Yeah, brilliant. Ben, we've got 2 questions. Someone's been selfish and he's actually asked 2 questions. It's from FPL Boona on Twitter. And he's asked, have you blocked the inject emoji?
No.
Brilliant, we can continue. And the second question has totally gone out of my head. So we'll move on to the next question. We've got a question from a community regular, Davey P. And he's asked, thoughts on West Ham with the injury to Antonio?
Ooh,
concern.
And actually, do you have an update as well? Because I think I've been reading things that these out for a few weeks.
Well, so first and foremost, I own Mikel Antonio, and I knew it was a calculated gamble. Going into this run-in, and the concern and the worry with Mikel Antonio, even if it's not serious, is historically we know that the hamstring problems aren't great. I think there's had at least 2, possibly 3 surgeries in there. He had a couple of scans earlier in this week. That in itself, the first one wasn't definitive. The second one maybe a little bit more clear cut. This is where there's other influencing factors coming into the situation. Now, with regards to David Moyes and looking at West Ham generally, we see Jared Bowen come into the game, scored 2 minutes after West Ham, great performance, another 3 points. That eases the pressure on David Moyes, and then the fact that he may feel he needs to maybe throw Mikel Antonio back into that high pressure environment. He's got Jared Bowen there that could sort of fill those boots maybe temporarily, so you can just hold him back. So even if it's a minor tweak, then I cannot see Mikel Antonio certainly not starting this weekend, and mightn't even be in the matchday squad. People normally, typically you see a hamstring problem and you default 2 to 3 weeks. Inherently for a grade 1, you're talking 7 to 21 days. That would be the norm. That would be, if you were to Google maybe a hamstring injury, that's what it would tell you. What I would say is, when we're coming to the business end of the season, and let's say West Ham are pushing for a Champions League spot, there are decisions that will be made internally with the club, often player-led. We talk about stakeholders, and by that, we're talking about directors, coaches, managers, and the player himself will want to be out there on the pitch. So it could be that there may be calculated risks taken at this stage of the season. So I wouldn't like to give any kind of definitive answer, because it sometimes goes against maybe medical guidance at this stage, because that if you're getting to maybe game week 36, 37, if you can get those games over the line and you can get those 3 points, you've got 2.5 months to recover and get ready for pre-season. So the dynamics of the situation change that. But it is a worry. And like I say, is if West Ham keep winning and Bowen, gets on the score sheet again, then that makes that decision nice and easy for David Moyes, and there's no need to rush Mikel Antonio back.
That's really interesting thing. I've never really thought of it that way, but when you put it as simple as that, it kind of makes perfect sense. Why rush a player back if you've got someone else that can come in and actually take a bit of that pressure away? Just let the player recover in his own time, so to speak. Without rushing anyone back. Yeah,
I mean, it's difficult. Look, managers, you've got to manage your squad. And, there's no doubt in the quality of Mikel Antonio. Like I say, he's a high-status player. West Ham are a different beast with him in their team.
Yeah,
but, you put that, you look at maybe Jared Bowen's performance and how would he feel if David Moyes is saying, well, actually, we've got a 50% fit Mikel Antonio. We will just put him in there again. And Jared Bowen's coming. The manager's come out in the press and he's praised us for my performance. I've got myself a goal. What more do I need to do?
Exactly.
Am I always going to be playing second fiddle? So, there's got to be some clever management on David Moyes.
No, definitely. Thank you very much for that. Paulie, one of our moderators and kind of long-time colleagues of Abuna and I's, he actually had... this is a personal one, by the way. Hi, Ben. I had shoulder surgery 4 weeks ago. I had my labrum reattached to the bone and had my collarbone cut down. How long will I be out for?
Wow. I mean, what I would say in it, I would never give any kind of sort of medical guidance without being able to assess anything, personally, because there are so many, again, external factors in terms of how your body may respond to the rehab, how that rehab's going. Just follow the guidelines. Make sure that you're engaging with your medical practitioner. That could be via, Zoom. Make sure that you're following the guidelines. And if you do experience any complications, any kind of setbacks, any niggles, then make sure again that you're feeding those back, because you need to maintain those open lines of communication. And even though your shoulder may be feeling a lot better, go through the protocol, go through the full journey to ensure that you've got that shoulder stability, not just in the short term, but also in the medium to long term.
No, perfect. Paulie, hopefully Ben has gave you a bit of food for thought there. Thank you very much for that. Buna?
Brilliant. Yeah, got a question from a WhatsApp group from Adam P. I've got one. Does Ben find it strange that whenever I read his name, it's to the tune No Diggity by Blackstreet?
Do I find it strange? Well, it is something that has been mentioned before, so I guess maybe not as strange as when I first heard it. Nothing surprises me anymore about some of the things that people say and do. So yeah, no.
Brilliant.
No.
We've got a few questions from our Discord. We've got a question from Ashish Galke saying, in your opinion, who would you captain if you don't own a City midfielder and Salah? Obviously, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? It's Rashford.
Well, yeah. I mean, we'll have to veer away from these conversations now about who's me captain. And go, well, who is your vice captain this week? And looking at the run-in, I mean, I do like Liverpool during the run-in. There's lots of love there. You've obviously mentioned about Salah heading into this particular game week. Big call. I'm looking at my own team here. I had a few disappointments last weekend. I mean, can you really look too far past Harry Kane maybe on current form, even though Tottenham aren't great? Look, I am one for the differentials. I often look at the likes of maybe a Ward-Prowse, Jess Lingard, even Rafinha. So look, I don't think there's anything wrong with looking outside of the norm and away from those. Those are the types of players that I'd be looking at. Everton's due a big performance after that shocker against Crystal Palace. Expecting to be. So then you could maybe look at DCL or potentially even Richarlison. If they really want to go differential, go Rodriguez.
Hopefully Lucas Digne does something for me before his farewell. You mentioned Rafinha against City. Do you anticipate there being rotation for City this weekend?
Without a shadow of a doubt. I think if you look game week to game week over the last 4 Premier, I think there's an average of just under 6 changes per lineup. If you factor in that one of those is Edison, who's always going to start, that you're almost looking at maybe 50 to 60% of that team is changing week in and week out. So, fighting on 4 fronts. Pep has made, no apologies of the fact that he's got a fully fit squad. It's just, there's a lot of strength and depth within there. So he has the flexibility. And what isn't good for fantasy managers, City are going out there and not only producing performances, but they're getting results as well. And so Pep's got the confidence and the ability to be able to, chop and change at will because it's not really affecting output.
So are you saying that even though you got involved in all this back at the late 90s kind of thing, nearly 20 years you were quoting, you still haven't figured out Pep Roulette then?
Oh, has anybody? I mean, it's an absolute nightmare.
Well, yeah.
He has went up in the estimations recently, because there was a point where he just used to flat out lie. I mean, I'm not bothered about managers who deceive and smoke and mirrors and playing a little bit of a game and being maybe a little bit economical with the truth. But when managers come out and flat out lie, that and Pep's done it on a couple of occasions, that drives us crazy.
Yeah.
Did Dean Smith lie about Grealish, or did he know at that point?
Now this is so. I'll always come out and defend clubs wherever possible. And we discussed this injury and the fact that I think initially the BBC and some of them, the main broadcasters suggested we're looking at 4 to 6 weeks. Dean Smith come out and said, well, no, we haven't ruled him out of next game week first and foremost. and you know what? He's his own worst enemy, because when you give a timeline like that, people are going to hold you to account.
Yeah.
Given the type of injury, which again we're reading between the lines, we think it's an overuse injury, and I suspect it's been brought on by the fact that we had the COVID, the players trained away from the ground, so there's a different environment, there's a different surface, a different type of training, and that cumulative effect of coming in and being thrown straight back into games. Now, with overuse injury, we're talking about pain management first and foremost. So that will be led by Jack Grealish. So inherently, as we seen last week, he can train for 5 days, absolutely fine. But on that 6th day, on the eve of the game, he's come out and he said, actually, it's a bit sore. I'm not going to risk it. And that again, then everything comes home to roost to Dean Smith, and it's like liar. You kind of so in his defence, the injury itself is one where you can't just pin it down to. It's not like a grade 2 hamstring tear where you go, okay, we're maybe looking at 4 to 6 weeks. It's one of those ones where you will assess on a day-to-day basis, and if there's a flare-up, then he needs to be eased back and it needs to stop. So that's why it's never as clear cut as everybody likes to think, and as how the media like to portray things.
No, thank you. Nihal, I think we've already covered this one, Nihal, so hopefully Ben gave you a good bit of insight. His question was how you got involved with the whole injury side of sport, but I know that we covered that off near the start, so thank you for that. Team James asks an interesting one, Ben, so it'd be interesting to hear your take on it. So speaking on injuries, what else? what do you reckon has gone wrong for the likes of Antonio and KT? Would you say that it's more a matter of them being uniquely injury prone, or are the physios at Arsenal and West Ham just not on?
Well, good. I like the question because it allows me to dispel a common myth.
Okay.
In the fact that so player gets injured. The first thing that people like to insinuate or throw pelters is the medical team is crap. It used to be something that was levied at Arsenal quite a bit. Now, unless we're talking about a player returning to play and then instantly breaking down, over and above that, it's got nothing to do with the medical support team. They end up training the players. They're not managing load. They're not seeing the players on a day-to-day basis. They're not working with them. End of story. So with the likes of maybe Kieran Tierney, in terms of his latest setback, nothing to do with the medical team. Nothing whatsoever. And I think what you also need to consider as well is it's easy just to look at a player and look at his time out and clump everything together. You need to consider each injury on its own merits and looking at the mechanism of injury, so how that occurred. If we're talking about soft tissue or muscular tears, then inherently you can maybe point a finger at somebody. There is maybe a decision that's been made that's been wrong. Maybe the players had too much load. Maybe the players fatigue and they've been risked. But if it's an impact injury, say Virgil van Dijk would be a good one. How can you legislate, for the likes of maybe Jordan Pickford coming out and tackling Virgil like that? It just, it's part and parcel of the game. It's a full contact sport, and you will get injuries. Yes. But with Antonio, we're talking about players who are highly explosive, quick turns of pace. Hamstring injuries often referred to as a sprinter's injury, because you're talking about moving at maybe 80 to 90% of maximum velocity, sometimes with restricted or even no recovery time. And the science will say when the more fatigued you become, the greater the chance of suffering a setback. And given the nature of Mikel Antonio's style of play, his body composition, he's a big, heavy, strong player, and he's never really able to put in consecutive minutes over long periods of time. It's almost like he's always playing catch up in terms of that. So he's always playing on the edge, and therefore he's always maybe susceptible to picking up those little muscle injuries and tears and strains.
No, perfect. Thank you very much for that. And I think that's really good to kind of see it from that kind of perspective, that because you're right, a lot of people do blame the physios, etc. at clubs, when in actual fact it's nothing to do with them. So no, thank you. Bruno, back to you with the whole Twitter sphere.
Yeah, I'm conscious of time, so I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to try and pick the more interesting questions. No offense to anyone else.
Jeez, I just realised, Ben, time just flies.
Yeah.
So got a question from John McEwen from our Discord. We've sort of already covered the first question. Most hits taken in a game week ever. I don't think that's quite applicable to Ben, unfortunately, John. But he also asks what your previous best rank was.
I was in around 30,000. Give me a look. I think maybe 30. Where am I? 30 or 33,000. So that was all right. That was a couple of seasons. That was 2018-19.
That was the same. I must have finished right next to you then. I'm pretty sure that's what I finished that year. Which kind of ties in with King Bebo's question actually in the chat as well. He's asking that. Everyone's always dead interested in people's overall ranks. So no, that's good. That picks that one out. I'm just scanning through here, Buna, if there's anything hitting us.
Yeah, whilst you scan, we got a really interesting question from Tom. I don't know if he's okay in the head, but he asked, "What is Ben's favourite injury?"
Favourite injury. I like to see something a little bit different, something a little bit unusual. I don't mind the odd concussion. Taking the player aside and making sure that they're okay. But I think just the nature of the job that I do, inherently, you've got to love every aspect of it, because that's all I do. And if I didn't, because I'm self-employed and I work from home, if it's something that I didn't have a passion for, and it's just too easy to not switch the computer on or not work for a day, or you've got to be so. I suppose I've got to have self-control and commitment to be able, because even before lockdown, people go, "Oh, hey, you work from home for yourself, must be fantastic." And the theory is, oh yeah, it is great, but what you don't see is the endless hours of sitting at a desk with nobody to talk to. Sometimes in the early hours of the morning, come rain or shine, and you've got distractions because people see in the house. I've got 2 young children. They see in the house, and it's instantly assumed that daddy's in. We can pester him. It's just so trying to manage families and everything that's going on. It is an absolute nightmare. It's and almost injuries and dealing with the numbers and everything else. That's my way. That's keeps me sane. Keeps us on the straight and narrow.
Oh, perfect. I
mean, I'll tell you, Tom's an interesting geezer, Lama. He's asked a couple interesting questions. The next one was, would Ben rather be a strawberry with human thoughts or a human with strawberry thoughts?
Bloody heck.
I mean, I would have to be the human with strawberry thoughts. I'm not really sure I'd be able to do much work as a strawberry.
Nah.
I tell you, it gets better though. It gets better. He then asked, "Would Ben be imprisoned in solitary confinement for 18 months, fed and watered for 500 million?"
Yes.
Brilliant.
500 million. Fuck. Jesus Christ. I'm even thinking 500 quid. I was like, heaven.
Love it.
There's loads of questions, and we apologise in advance that we can't get through you all. The one that I was going to pick out, which we've kind of half touched on, and I know, Ben, you're pretty well. We'll see what you say here, obviously, but I can't imagine you going straight in for a team in particular. But Nick asks the interesting question, and we like to just make sure that we try and get the interesting ones out there to you. Who's the worst club in your view for managing injuries in the Premier League? He feels that it could be Arsenal, but is that maybe just a myth?
Well. I mean, this is maybe a good question to maybe end on and dispel a few of those myths.
Let's do that.
Let's go with, and this is what you very rarely consider or think of. Look, it doesn't matter what the club you're at or how the medical team is. If you've got a player such as maybe Jack Wilshere, who physically isn't able to cope or tolerate the demands of the game, with the best coaches in the world and with the best physios, we know that Jack Wilshere can probably only, look to compete maybe 50 to 60% of the season. So first and foremost, you need to have players that can, perform at optimum levels. Not once a week, not even twice a week, sometimes on 3 times a week. So having the correct recruitment in place to be able to, again, to navigate those fixtures around hectic fixture periods and, Christmas and so on and so forth, that's imperative.
Yeah.
And, in defence of most clubs now these days, you've got, well-versed medical teams. Every player is monitored to the nth degree, whether it's through GPS tracking or saliva and hormone tests. So there is no real hiding place for players these days. Just some players aren't cut out for playing at the highest level. We talk about the Premier League being, the most entertaining, the most explosive, and that's backed up by the data. Players in the Premier League tend to cover more distance at a greater speed than any other league in Europe. So, even when you see players coming in and have had pretty good or perfect injury records before they arrived, then you see them breaking down in the Premier League because in itself it is fairly unique. Yeah. And it takes that period of adjustment. And, depending on what club you're looking at, you kind of expect maybe a Newcastle or those teams who've maybe got smaller budgets, smaller squads. If they're spending a lot of money on players, Callum Wilsons of this world, then they need to be out there and playing and justifying that price tag. And sometimes when they are in that red zone, as Arsene Wenger used to say, well, we've got no option but to put him out there on the pitch on the understanding that, well, you know what, on occasions he's going to break down. And you need to consider that. So I don't think it's a case of now necessarily about clubs mismanaging players. I think it has happened previously, but they're moving away from that now. There's so much money in the game. These players are their commodities.
Yes.
These are valuable assets, and they need to be protected. And we're even going down the route now where I think it was Matty Fryatt who actually sued Nottingham Forest for what he's seen was mismanaged of an injury that he had, and I'm not sure if that case was won or settled out of court, but either way he's come out of a winner. So players are long gone are the days where players are being patched up and given injections and being told just to get on with it. Now players are a lot more health conscious. They're a lot more aware of their longer term issues that can affect Gabriel Batistuta. If you talk to him now, I think he come out in an interview, he says, I wish I could just chop me ankles and feet off because I'm in so much pain.
Wow.
Because I was being patched up. go out there. He says that, so it's 24 hours a day, and so there's a duty of care there from the clubs, and hopefully we're all moving in the right direction with regards to player management.
No, definitely. Thank you, Ben, obviously, for just joining us this evening. As I said at the start, total honour and privilege. I did notice that I.L. Hay, I think I pronounced it right, about Andre Gomez. Just reading off of Ben's site here, it's another scan, so no return date at the moment, just to let you know about your toffees there.
Lama, did you see, very, very just a last sort of question. We had Paulie ask, and this is quite an interesting one, and I'd be really keen to know. He asked, what's the weirdest injury that you can recall from memory? He goes, I remember someone sneezing and pulling their neck.
Yeah, you know what it is? I had this one. I think TalkSport a few years ago asked us to come up with, like some of the weirdest injury. I'm sure we had one with Dave Besant, who dropped a jar of mayonnaise on his big toe.
Oh yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
Do you remember one, Ben? It was in the Scottish Premiership with Ian Wright, so it was a good while ago when he played with Celtic. And in his goal celebration, I don't really know what he was trying to do, but he basically landed on his neck. I think he was trying to just dive to the side and land like on his side, but actually landed on his neck, and that was him.
I think Luan Newcastle had a similar when he got injured doing one of his triple salto somersaults.
Oh yeah.
Did we have? I think was it maybe Chris Wood a couple of seasons back. He was missing for a game, insect bite, and then did we have an overuse injury for a player who was playing on a games console?
Wow!
And I think we coined the term Nintendonitis because that was one that springs to mind. But I think the Dave Besant one's the always one that springs to mind with the jar of mayonnaise.
Perfect. Listen, thank you very much, Ben, and thanks, chat, for all the questions. Sorry we couldn't get through you all, but obviously, as I say, always, privilege with all you boys and girls joining us this evening alongside Buna, and in this instance, Ben. Before we wrap everything up, Ben, I don't know who out there doesn't know who you are, but just in case somebody that's listening to us or watching this back doesn't know where to find you or where to kind of get involved in the stuff that you're involved in, please take the next, whatever you need to just do some self-promotion, Ben.
Not normally very good at this, but yeah, you'll find me most of the time in and around and responding to questions on Twitter. So it's at Ben Dinnery, BenDinnery. Of course, I run my own website, which is premierinjuries.com. That'll have a breakdown of all 20 teams in the Premier League with regards to player availability. We've got lots of things planned for the summer, so there should be a big website overhaul. We're looking to expand upon that, maybe looking at other leagues and again, deliver more insights. And finally, we're just getting a YouTube channel off the ground. It is injury related, but there's lots of stats in and around that. So again, talking about the injuries themselves, but looking at what that might mean to the community and looking at some of the underlying data which maybe underpin some of those players when they return to play.
Perfect, Ben. Thank you very much. Thanking you. Buna, I'll let you wrap everything up, young man.
Yeah, brilliant. Honestly, Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure. We would, I think we could go on for hours on end. It would be great to have you on again at some point, whenever your schedule allows for it. But other than that, thank you for everyone that's tuned in today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you all here. If you're new to the channel, please do consider hitting that subscribe button. We are now officially only 3 away.
Oh, Buna went all alien.
No, my fiance called me.
All right.
I told her, don't call me. I'm on the stream. So yeah, I don't know what you heard of that, but yeah, if you're new to the channel, please do hit that subscribe button. We're 3 away from 800. And other than that, we will be back on Sunday. I may also do a Q&A stream tomorrow around 4:30. So just keep your eyes peeled about that. But other than that, all the best and have a great weekend, guys.
Nice one. Take care, folks.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys. Much appreciated.
Cheers.
some better sounds no one's ever heard. I wish I had a better voice that sang some better words. I wish I found some chords in an order that is new. I wish I didn't have to rhyme every